Backseas Musical Podcast.
Resistance is useless!
In 1985, I was given a cassette copy of Marshall Crenshaw's third album, Downtown. I can't tell you how I got it. I can't tell you who gave it to me. I can't even tell you why I had it on a cassette. But I had it, and I loved it. All I knew about Marshall Crenshaw at the time was his 1982 hit single, Someday, Some Way. And while I liked that song a lot at the time, it would be his later stuff that I would fall in love with, and totally by mistake. What I learned about Marshall Crenshaw at the time was that the album Downtown was seen as a departure from his previous two records. I didn't even know what that meant, because on that album you had great songs like Little Wild One No. 5, Blues is King, I'm Sorry, But So Is Brenda Lee, and a bunch of others. And I loved those songs. Now, because I have a sick record-buying compulsion, I quickly caught on to everything else released by Marshall Crenshaw. I bought those first two records, and I kept buying the ones he would release after that. And while some would wonder why Marshall Crenshaw didn't become a household name, I would argue that it would entirely depend on the house. In my house, Marshall Crenshaw was a household name, with great records like Field Day, Mary Jane and Nine Others, Life's Too Short, Miracle of Science, number 447, plus a bunch of EPs, compilations, and live albums. Each one of these records are totally great, and each one of them deserve another round of consideration. Marshall Crenshaw is a singer, a songwriter, a wonderful guitar player, an actor, and one of those guys that when you go back and you listen to his records, you realize that you're listening to something really special. Marshall is about to re-release his 1999 album number 447 in February. The new version includes 2 unreleased tracks, and it sounds amazing. So with that in mind, I am thrilled to finally get a chance to talk to a guy that I have completely enjoyed for the last 40 years. It's Marshall Crenshaw on Backseas Musical Podcast. Hey, there you are. How you doing, Marshall?
Doing reasonably well. How are you, man?
I'm doing really good. Hey, I got to tell you, I've been on the Marshall Crenshaw bandwagon since pretty much the beginning. I remember hearing the first record when I was in high school and thinking, oh wow, what a great song that was. And of course, being in high school, I couldn't afford to buy it, so it took a few years. A couple years later, somebody had given me like a cassette copy of the album Downtown, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And I remember reading people saying, "Oh, it's such a departure from Marshall Crenshaw." I'm like, "A departure from what? This is a great record." It's almost like the word departure sounds like a bad thing. I didn't see it that way at all. So if I've contributed in any way to a car payment or a decent meal for you, just know that it was my pleasure to do it.
Okay, great. So thank you for your interest.
I want to ask you about these Razor and Tie reissues that have been coming out. I know you re-released Miracle of Science, which I love that record, but now you're about to release number 447. That's about to come out. What have you done differently to it from the original?
With this one, with number 447, it's been remastered, and that's pretty much about it. I mean, that was necessary because the albums have never been on vinyl before. And Greg Calby, the guy who mastered it the first time around, did it again because he no longer had the masters that he created back in 1999. But I just handed him the original tapes again, and off he went, So that's about it. There are 2 bonus tracks on the album, on the CD.
Are these new songs, or are these old songs from back in those sessions?
No, these are brand new recordings. The first ones that I've done since 2016. And if you buy the vinyl of number 447, you get a 45 inside that has the bonus tracks on it.
So my understanding is that you had to obtain the ownership of these records. There are 5 records with Razor and Tie. Is that right?
Yeah. And I mean, it was actually in the contract that I had with them that once a certain amount of time had passed, that the recordings would revert to me, from them to me.
Yeah.
And that's all that happened. It was built into the contract because I had a good lawyer at that time who was paying attention. I didn't ask him to put that in, but he did. And
Yeah.
so, you know,
Well, because I mean, you always hear stories about how artists will sign a contract with a record company, and for whatever reason, they're not reading it, they don't get the help they need to understand what they're signing. The next thing you know, they're signing
yeah.
away the whole thing. So it's nice to hear somebody retaining the rights to their music. That kind of has to put you in an enviable position.
I'm glad about it. You know, I mean, always had good lawyers back in the day, and right this minute, I control about half of my intellectual property from over the years.
That's about
It's good, you
100%
know.
more than most people have. So that's pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
So the one of the things I've always found interesting about your career, Marshall, is it's always been kind of funny to me how people have been trying to pin you down over the years to the point where you can't find an interview or an article about Marshall Crenshaw that doesn't mention Buddy Holly or even John Lennon for that matter. And yet, when I hear your music, I hear a whole hell of a lot more than just Buddy Holly. In fact, it's interesting to me that even when you've done cover songs, you've been doing cover songs from pretty diverse sources. I mean, Grant Hart from Husker Du, George Clinton, Richard Thompson. I mean, all these influences are there in your music, and a lot more diverse than I think most people or most critics really give you credit for.
Could be. I mean, people just hear the stuff the way that they hear it, you know, like it falls into the context of their own stuff that they know, you know, kind of. You know? I think that's how it works. But I will say that anytime anyone mentions me in the same breath as Buddy Holly, it does make me happy.
But after a while, as a fan, I have to say, I mean, your career, while different than Buddy Holly's, obviously, to me, it stands on its own as well and doesn't have to rely on the comparison.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. My stuff, you know, to quote Elvis Presley, I think when the secretary at Sun Records asked him who he sounded like, he said, "I don't sound like nobody." And you can take that two ways. You know, he's saying I don't sound specifically like anybody else, and I also don't sound like nobody. And so I will say that about me.
Yeah.
I don't sound like anybody else, and I don't sound like nobody either.
That's
You
it.
know?
That's it. I mentioned, the first record, the first two records, really, because I think Field Day is another a great record. The trajectory that you had just leading up to that. I mean, you're doing stage work with Beatlemania, and you're doing that for a couple years. Then all of a sudden, you start working on your own music after you get off the stage with that production. What happened between Beatlemania and that first record? Because that's a pretty
Between Beatlemania and the first record, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we had a really spectacular kind of rise in New York City. That period between Beatlemania and my first album might be my favorite chunk of time of the whole saga. Honestly, it was just a gas to stick our foot out the door in New York City and just immediately have people embrace what we were doing. It was joyful, you know.
yeah.
So that's, I mean, let me see. We got to the point really quickly where I had two of my songs being played on WNEW, which was kind of what you would call a mainstream rock station at that time. And this is before I'm signed to anybody. Well, anyway, it was Robert Gordon's version of "Someday, Some Way" was a big hit on NEW, and then I put out a single. Alan Betrock was a kind of a mentor to me for a minute, a real important person in my life, and he had a label called Shake Records, and he released my first single, and that got on WNEW. So back to back, I had two songs on the radio, so that was kind of wild. And then like the press is really on board with us, and every publisher in town and every agent in town is looking at us, and it was really fun and exciting, and I loved the whole, that whole thing, that whole phase. So then we had two really good offers on the table, one from RCA and one from Warner Brothers. And so it was, door number one or door number two. That's kind of how it went.
Yeah, and it worked out pretty well up until it didn't, which is the way it always seems to work out with
Yeah.
contracts. But it's funny in preparing for this, I actually listened to the Robert Gordon version of Someday Some Way, from Robert Gordon from Tough Darts. And as I'm hearing it, it's a song I love, but it's different than your version. And I found
Yeah.
myself being like, dude, you're doing it all wrong. It's like as
Oh,
good
well.
as good as this version is, it's like, your version is like, wearing a comfortable pair of shoes. It's like, that's the one. That's the way it's supposed to sound. When you write songs and somebody performs it, in their way. And I know you've written songs, with or for like Kirsty MacColl and the Gin Blossoms. When someone does your song, do you feel that way? Are you cool with the way they interpret your music, or do you say, "Hey, wait a minute, you got to fix it"?
I mean, it really varies. Uh, but I did like Robert's version of Someday Some Way. I mean, it really fits his personality and his character because he's
Right.
just like right on top of the beat, boom, 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 and that's kind of the that's him, and I mean, he did it first, right? And his version actually was released as a single by RCA and got up to somewhere like 19 like number 70 something on the Billboard charts.
Mm.
It was starting to climb the chart, but then right when the contract ran out, stay at RCA for another day to work the single, and he said, "Forget it," and split.
Yeah.
So that was the end of that. And then I didn't want to do the song on my first album. I thought, well, if everybody's heard it already. Everybody knows Robert Gordon's version. So that was, but then Warner Brothers insisted that I do it. Like they didn't ask me; they told me that I was gonna do it. But now I look at that as an instance of somebody rescuing me from my own stupidity. Because I love the record that we made of it.
Right.
I mean, I really love it a lot. But it's a lot different from, we're just kind of it's got a whole other groove to it than Robert Gordon.
You release it and you release the record and it becomes maybe like a surprise hit for a lot of people. Like out of nowhere, all of a sudden, Marshall Crenshaw's a really big deal. Do you feel at that young age you were prepared for the speed in which things were escalating?
I
Because
was not.
it was pretty quick.
No, I was completely in over my head. I mean, there was a really heavy hype surrounding our first album, and I could have either said yes or no to that, and I just thought, well, let me roll the dice and see what happens. But for every hype, there's a backlash, so that wasn't a good choice. And then as far as the song being a hit, I mean, hit records never ever happen by accident. So, but I didn't, I wanted hit singles, but I didn't really know how hit singles happened. I thought I knew, but I didn't, and I found that out pretty fast. So, no, I wasn't ready. Like I didn't understand the business. I didn't want to understand it.
Yeah.
I didn't want to take it. There was a part of me that didn't want to take it seriously, the business part of it. So that wasn't so smart.
Was that just a matter of your youth and inexperience, or were you just being rebellious about it?
Yeah, it was. I don't. It's hard to remember anymore because that's a long time ago, and it was kind of a young version of myself. But I think it was supposed to be on principle partly, but who knows anymore.
Right. So right after that, you were kind of pushed into doing another album pretty quick, which is even at that point, that's pretty unusual. It was like in just a few months, and you're working on the next record.
It was a panic move, and honestly, it was. But I got talked into it by the manager I had at the time, but I was okay with it. I just thought, yeah, I'll make another record. It's fun to make records, so let's do it. And we made a great one. I mean, as far as I'm concerned.
I thought Field Day was fantastic, and you had Steve Lillywhite produce it, which I think is fantastic. A big XTC fan, and he did that with he worked with Hugh Padgham, and just the drum sounds of Steve Lillywhite in his career show up pretty strongly in that record. But what's maddening for a fan is that album is almost impossible to find. It's like the one album in your in your catalog. That's almost like the holy grail. It's almost hard to find a copy of that.
Is it? I didn't know that.
If you look if you look for a CD version of it, is really hard to find.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, there's good news about that though. I'll tell you why it's hard to find right now. I mean, if you're looking for a used copy and can't find one, I can't answer to that. But it's neither, or maybe not any of my Warner Brothers albums right now are on any of the digital platforms, and that's because I reclaimed the U.S. copyrights to the recordings, and so they're going to be reissued.
Yeah.
But it hasn't happened yet. The first album, there's going to be a 40th anniversary reissue of my first album.
Jesus Christ.
It comes out in November, on Record Store Day next November, and then the following year there'll be a 40th anniversary re-release of Field Day, and they're both going to be really, really nice.
Yeah.
I already the first one's already ready to go, and Field Day is going to be nice too. It may be a drag, but it's going to have a good payoff.
I'm excited that both will get like a reissue, but on the other hand, I'm furious that we're talking about something 40 years ago.
Well, just stand by.
I will. I've talked to a lot of songwriters over the years, and I want to ask you about it too, because everyone's process is different, but it also sounds like a lot of songwriters kind of also say that writing songs is like an inconvenient compulsion. It's like, when they're trying to write a song, it's hard to write a song. It's almost as if you don't get a chance to find the song. And it's almost like the song finds you. And is your process of writing music like that? Or do you need like a certain environment or a certain, set of things that need to happen first before you can actually sit down and come up with something?
It's, there've been times when I've had the feeling that, and rather than trying to write the song, I'm trying to remember it. Right. Like I'm trying to look into the future and pull it out of the future. It feels like that. It's felt like that in certain instances, but I don't know. It's mysterious, but I don't know why I can do it, but I can. A mental quirk or something.
I know. I did an interview not that long ago with a guy who said it's like, there are times I need to do things in my life, like really important things, like stuff I have to do, like right now. And then all of a sudden I'll walk past my guitar and the guitar starts speaking to me. And it's like, nope, everything's got to be put on hold. I've got a song in here somewhere and I've got to get it out.
I can dig it. I do get completely absorbed in it when I'm doing it. I'm just like, I'm gone, I mean, you can't be like that 365 days a year. What kind of life would you have? But,
yeah.
Anyway, no, I mean, I love that I can do it. I don't know why I can, but it's great.
Do lyrics come as easy for you?
Yeah, and that I think is not necessarily like universal, but I mean, I read that it would take maybe a composer like George Gershwin. He could sit down and bang out a pop tune off the top of his head, and then his brother Ira would maybe take it like a month struggling trying to fit words to the melody. That's kind of how it is with a lot of people. But I'm like a guitar player and a composer first, and then the words come later. They're very important, like they're critical. But I sweat over those in a way that I don't really sweat with them. I don't sweat when I'm writing the music. I know I'm going to be able to do it.
Well, I mean, the good news is, your lyrics don't come across like they're bad lyrics at all. They're actually good lyrics. But when you do hear a song, when you hear a song with shitty lyrics, it stands out like a sore thumb. It's like, man, that would be a great song if the lyrics weren't such garbage.
I feel the same. It's like you can't if you mess that up, then the song is ruined. You might have a really nice piece of music. This has happened to me more times than I want to talk about, but where I've had a piece of music that I thought was really nice, and then I just blew it with the lyrics, in my opinion. Yeah. I'm not going to name them because I might accidentally name somebody's favorite song. I'm very self-critical, and people that love my records, I thank God that they love them, and I don't want to say, well, that one I blah blah. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
right.
I'm not going to put any bad thoughts in anybody's mind, but
I know in the past couple of years you've kind of walked away from making full albums of new music and have kind of taken a more like a singles approach with, you know, the EP records and even as you're talking about these reissues, putting new songs into that format. I mean, is that how you see things going forward with you, just to continue to add new music to older products, or do you see yourself getting to the point where you will make another new record soon?
I don't have any plans to make an album anytime soon, but you know, I don't want to rule out anything. I did these 2 tracks for 447, and like I said before, it had been a really long time, or a few years since, you know, I'd done it, and I mean, it was really it was joyful. I realized how much I love it, and how good I am at it. But you know, it brings me joy to do it. So I mean, one of these days I'll get around to it. You know, I don't know if I'll make albums, but I could make EPs again.
Yeah.
That was really fun. I did it from 2013 to 2016. My recording project that I had was a series of EPs, and I dug that, you know, because I set a timetable for them that a new one would come out every 6 months, and so then that meant that there was always something new on the way or new just out.
But you did stop doing that. Was there a reason to stop it, or were you just at that point, or was it just kind of like a played out idea?
Well, it was proscribed that it was going to be 6 over the course of 3 years. That's
Right.
you know, the cycle ended, right? Cycles end, right? So that's all it was. It's just time to stop doing that.
I was talking to a friend of mine this afternoon that I was going to be talking to you, and he was incredibly excited about it because he's seen you play out here in Massachusetts a few times, and he loves seeing you live. I've seen you live too, but it was, you know, many years ago, and it was great. But you've released 7 live albums, and the thing that I love about the live albums is I think you've like the latest one, the wild and exciting sounds of Marshall Crenshaw, is awesome. But
Yeah.
I also think you are responsible for what I think is maybe the single greatest title of an album I've ever heard, and that is I've suffered for my art, and now it's your turn. I think that is, it almost doesn't matter how good the record is. That alone sells the record for me.
Oh, great. I mean, I don't believe that I invented that. I think that I heard maybe like Henny Youngman on the Ed Sullivan Show or something. You know, he's about to play his violin, and he goes, "I've suffered for my art. Now it's your turn." You know, it's just a thing, you know, that I got somewhere. I don't know where, but yeah, when I thought of it as the album title, I thought, oh my God, that's a good one. Because it's hard to think of an album title. I mean, number 447 is me not being able to think of an album title and just putting a number on it as a joke. You know,
Kind of like a Chicago record. You know, you've made
that's what I
447
thought.
records.
I thought, yeah. Chicago and 42 or whatever it is, you know. And then I thought, how many records have I made? 447.
We talked a little bit about Steve Lillywhite, but you've also you worked with like T-Bone Burnett and Don Dixon and, you know, Ed Stasium and a few others, and then you started to produce music yourself. Is that challenging for you to do? I mean, is it the kind of role that was like an easy transition for you, or is it just a challenge to take on that much responsibility?
No, it was cool. I mean, when I first started recording, I don't know if you have this album or not, but there's one of mine called the 9-Volt Years.
Yes.
That was one of the Razor and Tie albums, and it's all home recordings that I did of various things, but it's heavy on stuff from the very beginning of when I was writing my own songs and trying to develop my own sound and stuff, you know. And I still love those recordings. You know, I was, you know, just like autonomous auteur kind of character in there with my 4-track tape machine and my cheap microphones, you know. So when I was not in the major label world anymore, I just kind of went back to that mode of being a solitary genius auteur. So it was fine, you know. I mean, and plus, you know, like you said, by the time I did the Razor and Tie records, I worked with a bunch of producers, and I just figure if I didn't learn anything during that time, that would be kind of weird.
Yeah.
Man, I was ready to do it, and glad to be able to do it. You know,
There's a song from one of those sessions that you brought up, the 9-Volt, that to me is like one of my favorite songs by you. It's something's got to happen. And I know it's like one of your earlier songs, but I just love that song. And the version that shows up on the best of This Is Easy, uh,
Yeah,
I think is just a great song.
that's the Alan Bedrock version, the Shake Records, the one that got on the radio in New York City and helped us get to where we got to. So yeah, I like that too, but it's really just, and I mean, Alan meant for it to be this way. It's like a note for note copy of the version that I did at home, that the one that's on the 9-volt years.
Yeah.
You know, I just was really in a zone during those pre Warner Brothers times. You know,
So what about, performing now? Obviously the COVID has really screwed up everyone's plans for performing, and it's hard to get concert halls and book those places. Where do you stand on any of that right now? Or what are you looking at?
well, you know, starting in June of last year, I played straight through to the end of the year. You know, I had like, I don't know, 25 shows between June and December of 2021, and then I had 2 shows this month, but they got postponed. And I'll tell you something, it like really rattled me, because any suggestion of a possible replay of 2020 is like, no, you know, I mean, I really didn't like it at all that the dates got postponed. But I have some shows in February that are still on the calendar. Nobody's saying let's move those, and don't, you know, because I don't want to hear about it. You know, I mean, I got my 2 vaccines and a booster, and if I catch anything, it's like it's just life. But I'm going with the flow. You know, I got to follow the social norms and the rules, and that's cool. But you know, I think that there'll be shows this year.
Yeah.
I mean, there already are some. I got stuff in February and in March too, and the shows that were supposed to happen this month got moved to April. So I think they'll all happen.
I've been to 2 shows in the last 6 months. One was at a concert hall in Fall River, Massachusetts, and it was really interesting. They were requiring everyone to bring their vaccination card, and not
Yeah.
not like a photo copy of it on your phone, but the actual hard cardboard copy of your vaccination card.
Oh,
Other than that,
wow.
then
Yeah.
you're on the streets. You said just a couple of shows, but everything is pretty close to like your home now. You're not going too far out.
Well, last year I traveled a lot. You know, I was on a lot of airplanes and stuff, in and out of airports. I mean, some of that is with the Smithereens. I don't know if you know about that or
Yeah,
not,
I
but
did. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I went to Mexico with them, so I mean, that's not. I'd never been there before, but I mostly do play in the Northeast, but not, you know, strictly.
How was that performing with the Smithereens? That's another band I absolutely love.
Uh-huh. Oh, it's tons of fun. Really, you know, just like a day at the beach kind of, you know. Nothing is my responsibility, and I like them a lot as people, and it's all good, you know. It's really fun.
We mentioned influences, before, and I knew you grew up outside of Detroit at a time when things were where Detroit was like the hub of music in America. Everything from Motown to the Stooges to the MC5. As a kid growing up around that time, how influential was all of that to you? The music of that city.
No, it was everything, you know, like everything I know about popular music. I learned, well, anyway, for the first 23 years of my life, I learned it all from Detroit radio. And but yeah, the musical legacy of the city and region of Detroit is vast and monumental and diverse too. And there was a book that came out, I think last year or maybe the year before, a big, huge 700-page book about a Detroit record label called Fortune Records.
Mm.
And I read it, and then just started back at the beginning and read it again. I mean, I just wanted to climb into this book and live there.
Yeah.
And I realized, you know, when I read it, that there's this whole world that I missed in the city of Detroit. I was too young to know about it and be there, you know, on the ground. But don't get me started talking about Detroit music, because I really love it.
One of the other things I wanted to mention is that you've played with some pretty amazing musicians too. Kenny Aronoff, I've spoken to, on this podcast. He's originally from Western Massachusetts, where I'm from.
Oh yeah.
And that he's a great drummer, and Jesus, can that guy talk?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was fun. But one of the guy that I really wanted to ask you about, and I think he's like one of the more unsung geniuses out there, is maybe Graham Maybe, who's played with Joe Jackson
sure.
for years, but he's maybe like one of the most underrated bass players in the world. I think he's just phenomenal.
He's really cool, and we're friends, good friends, I would say. I met him back in 1982 when I did some tour dates with Joe Jackson, and he and I just like hit it off.
Yeah.
Right then and there. And I mean, he's like a really, like a warm person. He's really good friends with other members of my family besides me. And he's a real somebody I'm really glad to know.
Yeah.
And it's great to play with him. He knows all my stuff. And is just like really solid all the time. Like I sometimes joke and call him my musical director when I'm on stage with him. But no, Graham is the greatest.
That's great.
Like you said before, it's like a really wide range of great people, and I'm, I appreciate that. I'm conscious of it, appreciative about it.
Yeah, but you've also done a bunch of. Are these shows that are coming up? Are these solo shows? Or are these with a band?
No, I don't want to play solo anymore anytime soon.
Yeah.
I always want to at least have a percussionist with me. And on the shows I have in February, it's going to be Manuel Quintana on percussion, and then the bass player was supposed to be Graham Maybe, but he hurt his wrist playing tennis. I mean, who does that, right?
At his age?
Anyway, he hurt himself, and so Tony Gagne is going to play, and that's another one of the best bass players in the world, Tony Gagne. I've known him longer than I've known Graham.
Wow. So is the dog okay?
I let him out. Yeah, he wants to get out there, and he likes the winter time.
He
he's
does.
A winter dog.
What's wrong with that dog?
Yeah.
Well, Marshall, it's really a pleasure to talk to you. Like I said, I've been a fan for an awful long time. I hope that there is new music and a lot of it coming in the future, because every record has got something really special to it.
Well, there's new music. There's Will of the Wind and Santa Fe, my new single, which is also bonus tracks on the 447 thing. But anyway, thank you for your enthusiasm, and it's great to talk to you, Michael.
We appreciate it, Marshall. Thank you very much. Again, the re-release of Marshall Crenshaw's 1999 album, number 447, is set to be released this February, and I hope you enjoy it. I also hope you enjoyed the show. Feel free to like it, share it, review it, tell all your friends about it. You can reach me at backseatrock102.com. I'd love to know what you think, and thanks again for listening to Backseat's Musical Podcast.